found that on-road emissions from Volkswagen's cars were well above VW standards. They also did not match the emissions outputs found under testing conditions. We know that VW tried to justify this discrepancy to regulators with explanations of technical issues and unexpected in-use conditions. We know that in December 2014, VW initiated a voluntary recall of nearly 500,000 vehicles to resolve, among other things, the emissions issues. Yet, when the California Air Resources Board tested the fixed vehicles, they found that the emissions were still above the legal standards. And we know that by July of this year, the EPA and CARB told VW that they would not approve the company's 2016 model year diesel vehicles for sale unless the emissions issues could be explained. VW was essentially forced to come clean, and they ultimately confessed that they had installed a defeat device in their diesel cars designed to circumvent EPA emissions standards for certain air pollutants. We know that this defeat device sensed when the vehicles were undergoing emissions testing and ensured emissions control systems were operating to pass. And we know that during normal road use, the emissions controls were reduced, and the cars were producing up to 40 times more nitrogen oxide than is allowed by emission standards. We know that almost 500,000 cars in the United States might be affected by this. Now, Mr. Horn, I'm glad you've come today to testify here, because while we know all of the things I just talked about, there's a lot more things we don't know and that we need answers for. For example, VW hasn't revealed how the defeat device affects the engine, why it was installed, and how it was able to evade emissions tests. You haven't revealed when and how the engines equipped with this defeat device will be fixed. You haven't told us whether this fix will affect fuel economy or performance of the vehicles. You haven't revealed what Volkswagen told regulators over the last year as EPA and the California board were trying to figure out why the vehicle's emissions were out of compliance. You haven't revealed whether the voluntary recall that VW set in place in 2014 was just merely a ruse. Was the VW Group of America actually trying to find out what was wrong with the cars and fix them? Or did VW know that the cars had defeat devices on them and were only trying to buy time with the regulators? You haven't revealed who's responsible for this scheme. We don't know if it came from Germany and who knew about it in the United States. Now, we've all seen the press reports, and we can all speculate about what happened here and why. But until Volkswagen comes forward with some answers and provides some assurances that we can trust about what they're saying, the American people, the regulators, and Congress are all left in the dark. So I hope, Mr. Horn, that you've come prepared to answer some of these questions, and I also hope that VW will be prepared to work with this committee as we move forward. Hundreds of thousands of owners invested money and trust in VW. Many of them bought those cars specifically because they were seeking environmentally friendly vehicles. Now, they're left with cars with much higher levels of pollution. They don't have any answers about when or how their car will be fixed or what kind of car they'll be left with. Earlier this week, I visited a Volkswagen dealership in Denver. I saw the pollution control equipment on VW diesel vehicles firsthand. These cars account for almost 25% of the sales at that particular dealership and a significant percentage of sales at VW dealerships in Colorado and across this country. Now, because they can't sell them, these cars are just sitting on the lots, which is a scene that's being repeated across the country. So, as Mr. Chairman, you say, it's a small percentage of all the cars on the road in the U.S. It's a tremendous economic impact to these dealers and also to the consumers who don't know what's going to happen to their cars. And so that's perhaps the key answer that I'm looking for today. What do we do moving forward? Now, Mr. Chairman, this subcommittee's been here before. In the last 15 years, we've had Ford and Firestone, Toyota, GM, and Takata before this committee. We were able to get information from all these committees to help us understand what happened. But most importantly, we've used this information to chart a path forward and to help the consumers affected by this event. I hope that Volkswagen can similarly tell us today what's happening, and I hope that they will get beyond this series of terrible decisions and do something to restore the public trust. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the chairman of the full committee, gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton, for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Farfanugan, it makes a car a Volkswagen. That ad campaign swept the nation in the 90s. VW has long enjoyed an almost cultish following dating back to the Beetle, VW Van, and the Rabbit. But through the years, something apparently became rotten in Wolfsburg, and cheating and betrayal became part of that game plan. There's a lot that we don't know about VW's actions or their motivations in attempting to skirt emission standards. But regardless of intent, they have betrayed the trust of regulators, dealers, and suppliers, and most important, the driving public. Probably the most famous congressional hearing question is, what did you know and when did you know it? Asked by Senator Howard Baker back in the 70s at Watergate. Now we learn that you knew some 18 months ago. So we add, what did you really do to fix it and come clean versus simply going along? Ultimately, the saying rings true. Cheaters never prosper, and that's why we're here today. We have many questions about how we got here and the road ahead. Why would one of the world's largest automakers go to such lengths to avoid emissions requirements? Who was responsible for these decisions, and why did they, for years, even as the technology improved, continue that path? If they were willing to cut corners here, what else have they done? How will you fix the flaw and when? Will the fix affect the performance of these vehicles? Unraveling these questions will take time, and I don't expect that we're going to discover all the answers today. But if VW is serious about rebuilding this broken trust, its leaders will need to demonstrate a serious commitment to answer these and many other questions prompted by its actions. This requires transparency, cooperation, and clear, consistent communication not only with this committee, the EPA, and other ongoing investigations, but also with its customers, suppliers, dealers, and general public. VW will inevitably pay a steep price for this dirty little secret. How it responds to the failure will go a long way to rebuilding or further eroding the public's trust. VW must also consider what implications these actions have for the thousands of Americans that it employs, including their facility in Auburn Hills, Michigan. Every single one of us who has ties to Michigan is proud of our rich tradition that is so closely intertwined with the success of the automobile. In fact, Michigan is one of several states that have launched their own investigations. All automakers must advance by imagination and innovation, not by gaming the system and breaking the law. We will get some additional insight today, but the committee's investigation is just beginning. This hearing is an important step. As we receive documents and information, new details are certain to emerge. I look forward to getting to the bottom of this issue as quickly as possible. I take this very personally. As the author of the TREAD Act to protect the public, Congress was very clear in our work to protect consumers from abuses from automakers, which included steep fines and, yes, criminal prosecution. VW has betrayed a nation of regulators, loyalists, suppliers, and innocent customers. It's time to clean it up or get off the road. I yield the balance of my time to Marcia Blackburn, the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Horn, thank you for being here. And I think it's completely appropriate that you come before the committee, that you apologize for the actions, and that you and VW take full responsibility for what has transpired. It is disappointing. I'm fully aware that our governor has been at the Chattanooga facility, and I know that the governor, state legislators, the other members of the congressional delegation, and I are quite concerned about this. You've got a lot of hard-working, honest Tennesseans who are at that Chattanooga facility. And we are quite concerned about the actions of a few. So a few VW employees, not Chattanoogans and not Tennesseans. We're going to be very precise with you and VW. It is, as the chairman said, and as Chairman Murphy has said, it is basically the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Why you did it, how you did it, when you did it, when you knew who carried this out, where did this take place? Did it go across the brands? Was it pointed at EU regulations? Was it pointed at some of the climate regulations? Is the EPA too overburdened to have noticed this? This is a systemic failure. And I will also point out, some want to say it's a safety issue. No, sir, this is an issue of integrity. So we appreciate that you are here. We look forward to hearing from you, and I want to yield the balance of my time to the Vice Chair of the subcommittee, Mr. McKinley.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this meeting. Those of you have talked about the cars. My first was a 1957 Volkswagen. I think I've got everybody beat on that. But listen, there should be just zero tolerance for this unethical behavior and flagrant disregard of the U.S. laws, public health and consumer. That's why this hearing is important to us today. The American people need to understand what happened, and how it will be resolved. And they feel in West Virginia that they've been deceived. And so on Monday, there was action taken by Attorney General to file action against this. I also want to just touch on the university. West Virginia University used a fraction of the money that we spend with EPA, just a fraction of the money to make this discovery. And they found out, as you know, that one of the cars that they tested was 15 to 35 times more emissions than they were allowed. Another was 5 to 20 times more emissions. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to touch on the fact that this opportunity about WVU and what its research, how research dollars can work. And this is what was happening, not the EPA, but this was a university able to accomplish this. So I'm looking forward to this hearing and getting some clarity as to what this is. So I thank you very much for holding this session and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. We now recognize the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. We're here today because Volkswagen lied. They lied to regulators, they lied to their customers, and they lied to the American people. We all have many important questions that deserve answers. What did Volkswagen do to its cars? Why did they do it? And who knew this was happening both in Germany and here in the United States? This whole scheme makes me question how much we should trust Volkswagen. And to be honest, this committee's investigations over the last 5 years make me question how much we should trust the auto industry in general. Let me remind the committee of the difficult history the American driver has had with the auto industry in recent years. In 2010, this committee investigated Toyota's recall of 9 million vehicles worldwide for unexplained cases of sudden unintended acceleration. Dozens of people died in accidents linked to runaway Toyota vehicles. Our committee held multiple hearings, and in the end, it was determined that Toyota knew about certain problems with their vehicles that, if fixed early, would likely have saved lives. In early 2014, we launched an investigation of General Motors ignition switches that killed many people. Our committee's investigation found that individuals within GM knew about the deadly ignition defect for nearly a decade before the company initiated a recall. Later in 2014, we learned of the exploding Takata airbags installed in vehicles made by at least 11 auto manufacturers. The recalls for airbag problems began as early as 2008, yet Takata and NHTSA continue to investigate whether additional recalls are still necessary, and Takata still has not determined the root cause of the defect, which has killed a number of people worldwide and injured hundreds more. And now we have Volkswagen, a company that told regulators that their vehicles met emission standards but had actually installed defeat devices to bypass emission controls. Over the past 5 years, the world's 3 largest automakers have come before this committee to admit that they have cheated the system and lied to American customers. This seems to be a pervasive culture of deception in the auto industry, and it has to stop now. Mr. Chairman, the American people need to know that they're safe on our roads, and they need to know that when they decide to buy a car, they're actually getting what they paid for. The auto industry has deliberately chosen to perpetuate lies and mislead consumers. But the American public are not crash test dummies and cannot be treated as such. Mr. Horn, I understand that you won't have all the answers here today, but please don't hide behind an internal investigations excuse. It's time for Volkswagen to be forthcoming with its customers, regulators, and Congress about what you did to these cars and why. We deserve an explanation. And I'd like to yield, Mr. Chairman, my remaining time to Ms. Schakowsky.
Thank you for yielding, Mr. Ranking Member. We'll hear a lot from Volkswagen today. We'll hear apologies, I'm sure, for Volkswagen's deliberate deception of the American people and federal and state public health agencies. We'll hear a pledge to get to the bottom of this issue without delay and to fully cooperate with investigators. We'll hear how the use of so-called defeat devices are incompatible with Volkswagen's corporate culture. And I want to tell you, Mr. Horn, I don't buy it. The American people, the EPA, and their counterparts around the world have been defrauded by Volkswagen. The company's word isn't worth a dime. The only thing I want to hear today is exactly how will Volkswagen make this right by consumers. Saying it will take time to design and implement a fix is insufficient and I think unacceptable. People shouldn't have to wait to get the fuel economy, the low emissions, and performance that they already paid for. If they want it, every Volkswagen clean diesel vehicle owner should be able to get their money back, all of it. The American people deserve answers. Yes, there are a lot of questions, but there are also thousands of owners of clean diesel Volkswagens out there, and what they're wanting to know is what are you going to do for them and when? And I say now. So I expect those answers to be provided today, and I yield back to the ranking member of the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless anyone else on this side would like the time, I'm going to yield back. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I also ask unanimous consent that the written opening statements by other members of the committee be introduced into the record, and without objection, the documents will be entered into the record. Are you aware that the committee is holding an investigative hearing, and when doing so, has the practice of taking testimony under oath, Mr. Horn? Do you have any objections to testifying under oath? Thank you. The Chair then advises you that under the rules of the House and the rules of the committee, you are entitled to be advised by counsel. Do you desire to be advised by counsel during your testimony today? One more, please. Then in that case, would you please raise your right hand and I'll swear you in. Stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. The record show the witness answered yes. You are now under oath and subject to the penalties set forth in Title 18, Section 1001 of the United States Code. You may now give a 5-minute summary of your written statement. If you would please make sure your microphone is on and pulled close to you so we can hear you. You have to press the button. Is it on?
Right here.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Chairman Upton, Chairman Murphy, Ranking Member Pallone, Ranking Member DeGette, other members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today to testify before the committee. My name is Michael Horn, and I'm President and CEO of Volkswagen Group of America, a subsidiary of Volkswagen AG headquartered in Germany, in Wolfsburg. I volunteered to come here before this committee at the very outset of these inquiries in an effort to show our commitment to cooperation. We have not had the opportunity to review all aspects of this matter. Indeed, the investigation is just beginning. Therefore, my testimony and my answers to your questions will be, by necessity, have to be considered preliminary and based on my best current recollection and information. On behalf of our company and my colleagues in Germany, and me personally, I would like to offer a sincere apology for Volkswagen's use of software programs that serve to defeat the regular emissions testing regime. In the spring of 2014, when the West Virginia University study was published, I was told that there was a possible emissions non-compliance that could be remedied. I was informed that EPA regulations included various penalties for non-compliance with the emission standards, and also that the agency could conduct engineering tests on their own, which could include analysis on defeat devices or other auxiliary equipment. Let me be very clear about this. While I was told about the EPA process, I was not then told, nor did I have any reason to suspect or to believe that our vehicles included such a device. I was also informed that the company engineers would work with the agencies to resolve the issue. Later in 2014, I was informed that the technical teams had a specific plan for remedies to bring the vehicle into compliance, and that they were engaged with the agencies about the process, and you mentioned this also in your statements. On September 3rd, 2015, Volkswagen AG disclosed at a meeting with the California Air Resources Board and the US Environmental Protection Agency that emission software in four-cylinder diesels vehicles from model years 2009 until 2015 contained a defeat device in the form of hidden software that could recognize whether a vehicle was being operated in a test laboratory or on the road. The software made those vehicles emit high levels of nitrogen oxides when the vehicles were driven in actual road use rather than laboratory testing. In Volkswagen's recent ongoing discussions with the regulators, we described to the EPA and CARB that our emissions control strategy also included a software feature that should be disclosed to and approved by them as an auxiliary emissions control device, which is also called AECD, in connection with the certification process. As a result, in order to show that we act immediately, we have withdrawn the application for certification for our Model Year 16 vehicles, and we are now working with the agencies to continue the certification process. These events, and I fully agree on this, are deeply troubling. I did not think that something like this was possible at the Volkswagen Group. We have broken the trust of our customers, dealerships, employees, as well as the public and the regulators. And let me be very clear, we at Volkswagen take full responsibility for our actions, and we are working with all the relevant authorities in a cooperative way. I'm here to offer the commitment of Volkswagen AG to work with this committee, to understand what happened, and how we will move forward. EPA, CARB, the US Department of Justice, state attorneys general, as well as other authorities are fulfilling their duties to investigate this matter. And we are determined to make things right. This includes accepting the consequences of our acts, providing a remedy, and beginning to restore the trust of our customers, dealerships, employees, the regulators, and the American public. We will rebuild the reputation of a company that more than 2 million people worldwide, including dealers and suppliers, rely upon for their livelihoods. Our immediate goal is to develop a remedy for our customers. While much work is still to be done, I'd like to talk today about how we get from where we are now to that goal. First, we are conducting investigations on a worldwide scale on how these matters could have happened. Responsible parties will be identified and held accountable. Thorough investigations have already begun, but any information development at this stage is preliminary. We ask for your understanding as we complete this work. Second, it's important for the public to know that, as the EPA has said, these vehicles do not present a safety hazard and remain safe and legal to drive. Third, technical teams are working tirelessly to develop remedies for each of the affected group of vehicles. These solutions will be tested and validated and then shared with the responsible authorities for approval. There are the three groups of vehicles involved, each containing one of the three generations of the 2-liter diesel engine. Each will require a different remedy, but these remedies can only be our first step to our customers. Fourth, we will examine our compliance processes and standards at Volkswagen and adopt measures to make certain that something like this cannot happen again. Fifth, we commit to regular and open communication with our customers, dealers, employees, and the public as we move forward. And as first steps, we have set up a designated service line, website, microsite to be a channel for this communication, and I've sent a personal letter to every affected customer. I can offer today this outline of a path forward towards the goal of making things right. Nevertheless, Volkswagen knows that we will be judged not by our words, but clearly about our actions over the coming weeks and months. These events are fundamentally contrary to Volkswagen's core principles of proving value to our customers, innovation and responsibility to our communities and our environment. They do not reflect the company that I know and to which I have dedicated 25 years of my life. It's inconsistent that this company involved in this emissions issue is also a company that had invested in environmental efforts to reduce the carbon footprint in our factories around the world, where our plant in Tennessee is the best factory in this respect. In closing, again, I apologize on behalf of everyone at Volkswagen. We will fully cooperate with the responsible authorities. We will find remedies for our customers, and we will work to ensure that this will never happen again. Thank you again for allowing me to testify today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. On September 3rd, 2015, VW admitted to CARB and EPA that it had installed defeat devices in certain model year 2009 and model year 2015 vehicles. To the best of your knowledge, did VW install this software for the express purpose of defeating emissions controls?
To our understanding, and this is also part of the investigation, it was installed to this purpose, yes, for this purpose.
Now, in your written testimony, you noted that you were made aware of potential emissions compliances in the spring of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
You also noted discussions at the time about penalties for noncompliance and the EPA's ability to test for defeat devices. At that time, were you aware or informed that these vehicles contained defeat devices?
No.
When did you first learn then that VW vehicles contained a defeat device?
Around the September 3rd meeting, a couple of days before.
And then why were you having discussions about defeat devices in the spring of 2014 then, if there was no knowledge or at least a concern that these vehicles contained a defeat device?
So the University of West Virginia made the study. There was a Jetta and a Passat in there and another off-road vehicle. I don't want to name the brand now. And the results were communicated. And in this context, I was told by our experts in the Auburn Hills office, and it was also, just 4 months into this market, that of course, not complying with emission standards is relating to fines and hefty fines, specifically here in the US. And that those experts, including the German technology department, would check on the study results. As you also mentioned, it was a small team. Results have been published with all the emissions which went overboard, and that they would check this, point one. Point two is they would also look and with all the responsible departments, and there was a number of experts department in Germany, and then how to possibly fix this. And then there was the notion in this communication that also the EPA or the agencies could check also on their own, which to my degree is normal around the world that agencies check once in a while on their own, for auxiliary devices, including defeat devices. And at that point of time, I had no understanding what a defeat device was, and I had no indication whatsoever that a defeat device could have been in our cars.
So let me go back. Mr. Horn, the new chief executive of Volkswagen, Mr. Mueller, has been quoted in media reports this morning saying that only a few people were involved with the deception. Now, I have to say that I don't take much comfort in that, especially knowing that Volkswagen has been known for superb engineers and mechanics. Now, isn't it I wonder, shouldn't they have picked up on this? But isn't it true that the technology was installed in the automobiles, at least initially, because the cars could not meet the new, more stringent emission standards for diesel engines?
Yes, to your last question, this appears to be this way. And to newspaper articles about possible quotes of Mr. Müller, I don't want to quote this. As I said, also the investigations are preliminary. 1 week, our group revision did the investigation from September 22nd to October 1st, and then the entire investigations on this matter is turned over to an external agency, law firm called Jones Day, American company, which is now going through the systems, outside advice, outside counsel.
I think what we find amazing is that West Virginia University discovered this, and your army of brilliant engineers and talented mechanics didn't know something was amiss, and I'm sure we'll have more questions about that. But I want to ask you this. In terms of VW's status for remedying these defeat devices, who's responsible for developing and testing a solution?
The responsibility for developing and testing the engine and drivetrain softwares lies within the engine and drivetrain division in Germany, in Wolfsburg, for the four-cylinder TDI engines.
Now, will this require a software patch or changes to the actual vehicle's architecture and hardware?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think we have to differentiate now into the three groups of cars. You've mentioned that roughly 500,000 cars are affected. Out of those, around about 430 vehicles, which were the very early vehicles, started here in 2009. And for those cars, we believe that a software-only solution will not be possible, because also, to be quite frank and logic, if it would have been possible, they would have done it in the first place. So for those cars, we are working on both software and hardware solutions, and there are different strategies about an additional NOx catalytic converter, as well as an SCR or rear tank. But this is something which is hardware engineering, which is a little bit, it's complex and it takes time to develop and to test this. This is one of the strategies. The Generation 2 vehicles, which is just the Passat model. I've here the 90,000 cars here in the US. This will be most probably a software solution. This is tested now and could involve one or the other, let's say, sensor. But whatever I explained to you now anyways is being discussed in a timely manner now in the next couple of weeks with the California Air Resources Board and the CARB. For the Generation 3 vehicles, so the actual...
Can I ask, because I've gone way over time, I'm sure other colleagues are going to be asking some more detailed questions, and we'll get to that. But I now need to yield 5 minutes to recognize Ms. DeGette for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Mr. Horn, your company acknowledged that it installed these defeat devices on a number of models dating back to 2009, correct?
Sorry, I have a problem understanding with all this noise down here.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, can you please have the quiet in the room so Mr. Horn can understand me?
Yes, thank you. The room will please be quiet, especially up front. Thank you, so you're not distracted.
Thank you.
All right. I'll ask that again, and if I can have the clock reset to 5 minutes. Mr. Horn, your company has acknowledged that it installed these defeat devices on a number of models back to 2009, yes or no?
Yes.
And do you know how the various defeat devices installed in the cars actually work at this point?
Personally, no. I'm not an engineer.
Does someone at VW know how these defeat devices work?
I believe this is also within the investigations. And
can you please give us the information when you find out?
We will.
Thank you very much. Now, you mentioned this West Virginia University study that was conducted in May of 2014, which found that the real-world NOx emissions on several Volkswagen vehicles exceeded EPA standards by as much as 35 times. Following publication of that study, VW represented to the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, and to the EPA that the increased emissions were due to technical issues and unexpected in-use conditions, correct?
I'm sorry. You guys cough here all the time, and I've trouble.
All right. I'll ask the question again.
Thank you.
After that study by West Virginia University, isn't it true that VW told the EPA and the California Board that the increased emissions were due to technical issues and unexpected in-use conditions?
Yes.
Yes.
True.
And those representations at that time were, in fact, incorrect and false, weren't they, sir?
Yes.
Yes, they were. Now, to your knowledge, did anybody at the Volkswagen Group of America know at that time that, in fact, those discrepancies were due to these defeat devices when they made those representations to the regulators?
To my knowledge, at this point of time, no.
No one in the U.S. did?
No.
Okay. Now, in December 2014, VW proposed a recall of 500,000 vehicles to resolve the, quote, technical issues. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And, in fact, a number of those vehicles were recalled. Is that correct?
Yes, most of them.
But after they were recalled, the California regulators still said that that fix did not work. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Now, to your knowledge, did anyone at the Volkswagen Group of America know about the existence of these defeat devices when the company announced that recall in December of 2014?
To my best knowledge today, no.
Mr. Horn, when did you personally learn of the defeat device and under what circumstances?
Around the meeting on September 3rd with CARB and EPA.
Okay, now, you talked, when the chairman asked you about these cars, I'm concerned about what we're going to do about the 500,000 cars we have on the road in the U.S. And the first thing is, as you just testified, about 430,000 of those cars cannot be fixed by a software-only solution. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's because of the way that the engine is designed in these vehicles, correct?
I would say not the engine is designed, but all the after-treatment systems.
Right. And I've got to say, I've got to acknowledge my wonderful dealer, Fred Emick, who's here today, and he let me come and talk to his wonderful mechanics on Monday. They gave me this chart right here. I tried to take the part itself, but it was too heavy, and they told me I'd have to probably pay them $2,000 if I lost it. So I decided to take the chart instead. This is the chart of the exhaust system on these 430,000 cars. And as I could clearly see, you can't do a minor little fix to fix this problem. So what is VW going to do for these 430,000 cars so that the users can use them and so that they can pass the emissions tests?
So from this distance, I can't see the chart, but I believe it's maybe something out of our service literature or customer literature.
It's the exhaust system for these cars.
Yes. But
what can be done to fix that?
There's two scenarios next to the software adjustments, and one scenario.
Well, these are for the cars that can't have that the software adjustments will not work.
We're talking now about generation 1 cars, the 430,000 cars.
That's right.
The picture you have shown, and the treatment software alone doesn't work because otherwise they would have done it right.
Right. So what are you going to do for those cars?
Two technical scenarios: either an urea tank, SCR tank, to put AdBlue in there, or a specific catalysator for the NOx.
Okay, but those cars don't have the urea tank right now.
No, that's why it has to be.
So this would be a major fix, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what is the time frame VW has set for that fix?
We are still working on the time frame, and it's too early to say when this fix exactly is going to take place.
When are these dealers going to be allowed to sell these cars?
The issue with the dealers, as Fred Emick told you, is that we have not the Model Year 16 certified, and we have stop sale on our own
Right. When is that going to be fixed? Is he going to be able
15th.
to sell those cars?
There's two scenarios. A scenario, we are now trying to get a conditional approval with the EPA until we have the final software fix beginning of next year.
Beginning of next year. And in the meantime, what are the dealers and the customers supposed to do, the ones who have these cars?
Well, in the meantime, no customer can buy a car because it's not available for them. And with the dealers, we've very early started a program to work with them, to also help them financially, and to communicate with them.
But the 430,000 cars that are already on the road, what are those customers supposed to do? Their cars cannot pass the emissions test.
The EPA has said, and they've repeated this also in their statement, that these cars are legal and safe to drive.
Thank you.
And until now, there's no indication that they didn't pass any emissions tests.
Thank you. Gentleman's time's expired now. We need to recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton of Michigan, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the specifics of the defeat device. So I live in Michigan. Where I live, we don't need to test our cars for emissions on an annual basis, as many states require. Certainly in this region here in D.C., I know they do. So how is this defeat device actually set up so that it was different when an individual drove it down the road versus taking it to a service station and getting the emission sticker that is often required in the states that require such.
So
I've been told a couple of things, but I just want to know if you can walk me through how that could change the emission system. What happens?
I can share my best knowledge, but I'm not an engineer, neither a software engineer.
Well,
but let me try to explain. My understanding at this point of time is that the software was designed that the vehicle or the software could detect whether it was on a dyno, on a testing laboratory environment, or whether it was on the street. And one example of this, as experts have explained to me, is that the software could detect whether the steering wheel made an angle. So, and there might have been, and there will be other parameters, like maybe speed and change of speed and those things.
Maybe the weight of the driver in the driver's seat?
I don't think so, but maybe. I don't know.
So, wouldn't it be easy to develop the software that would just remove that?
Yes, this software will be ready.
But of course, when that happens, the car isn't going to meet the emissions test.
Regarding the model year 16 and 15, which we are the generation 3 cars, which we are discussing right now with the agencies, the defeat device will be either switched off and from January onwards will be completely taken out of the car, and those cars will pass the emissions tests.
But so how many vehicles will not pass the emissions test of the ones that you've identified?
Now, my question.
So so you'll be able to do that with the later versions, right?
We have,
but not the earlier versions of the vehicle. They won't be able to pass by turning off the device, the defeat device. There'll be a number of cars that, in fact, will not meet the current standards, and that's your
current standards. Yes.
And
right.
how many of those vehicles are there on the road?
Well, we have a total of 500,000, 430,000 Generation 1 vehicles, 95,000 Generation 2 vehicles, and then it's around 70,000 Generation 1 vehicles. And so now all of these cars are out of the legal compliance, clearly. But as EPA has said, all these cars are legal and safe to drive for the owners. So we're not selling the cars, but the owners can legally drive and safely drive their cars.
So your dealers across the country, they have their finance plans where they have quite an inventory, I would guess, of cars that they're now unable to sell. They've paid in advance for those under the financing plan that the dealers have, and they are not going to be able to sell them for a number of months, perhaps even as long as 6 months at a minimum, until the fixes can be done. What type of remedies are you offering the dealers in terms of financial incentives, knowing that they've paid for these cars and frankly lost a boatload, I would imagine?
Yes, and this is
that
also,
inventory has got to be pretty big loss.
This is also one of the things which troubles me personally very much, because the last 1.5 years we worked very hard and we brought profitability up and all of those things. But I tell you exactly. On Friday the 18th, the notice of violation was communicated. We had a call with the National Dealer Council. Some of the folks are sitting behind me. On Monday, we issued our first financial relief aid. So we put all the TDIs, used cars, CPO cars, and new cars on free flooring. We took all the bonus thresholds out for car sales. So we paid maximum bonus for each car sold. And we took also out the customer satisfaction targets, objectives, and we paid maximum customer satisfaction bonus on those cars. And this is more than $1,000, $1,500 per car. Coming towards October now, we provided every dealer around the U.S. with a discretionary fund, which was explained to them through the district managers, sales operations managers, and which was wired to the dealers on October 1st. I don't want to call out the number, but it's a significant amount of money in order for them to have flexibility. So no accountability towards us, flexibility to solve the most urgent customer cases, or to invest or to put the money where they think it would be fit. And now, you know, when I come out of this congressional hearing on Friday, we look at the next programs in order how can we help the dealers with the cash flow of their cars, with the cash position, because one thing is very, very clear, and I'm damn sincere about this. The dealer profitability in this country is my first objective, and I said this in January 1st, and I continue to say this. So this is one part, and also on Friday we look very intensively into the customer remedies and what we need to do the customers, and there will be the first scenarios on the table.
All right. Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Horn, your statements so far don't give me much confidence that we're ever going to see a fix for these vehicles that are impacted. You know, you say that you can't be fixed by software-only solution. You don't have a necessary timetable as to when the fix is going to begin. Have you been given enough information about how the defeat device affects the engine to actually make informed judgments on whether the fix will actually work? I mean, how do we know that what you're proposing to do is actually going to work?
Whatever I tell you here today is agreed and is coming from the technical engineering department in Wolfsburg. And alongside our actions in Europe, we have to have our actions in the US. And the technical...
No, I understand, but I mean, I think, is it fair to say that you really don't know whether you can fix these vehicles to achieve the emission standards? Or
we know that we can fix these vehicles to achieve emission standards.
All right, but then what happens with regard to other things like fuel economy, engine performance? You know, people bought these vehicles thinking that they were going to meet the emission standards, they were going to have good fuel economy, they were going to have good engine performance. Can you guarantee that any fix you make to the vehicles doesn't affect fuel economy or engine performance or both?
At this point of time, my understanding is if we correct the nitrogen oxide emissions to the emission standards, the customer will get the MPG on the Monroney label. That's my current understanding. Whether the full performance of the car, and this is something also our chairman, Matthias Müller, our CEO, Matthias Müller, said in Germany, maybe on top speed there might be 1 or 2 miles per hour might be missing. But this is, of course, something which we will share with the agencies. But current understanding is that the customer will keep the Monroney label miles per gallon.
I mean, the concern I have is, you know, when you buy one of these cars, you're relying on not only the emission standards, but the fuel economy is good and the performance is good. And, you know, I think you get to the issue of damages here. In other words, if I'm an owner and the fix doesn't achieve good performance, good fuel mileage, then I'm going to expect to be compensated in some way if that's not the case. And, you know, I just remain concerned that any fix is going to substantially change the cars and that it's unfair to the consumers who bought the cars and relied on them because they expected them to perform a certain way. But you're telling me that the fix will guarantee good performance and will guarantee good fuel economy.
I said to my current understanding, in achieving the emission standards, the Monroney label miles per gallon will be achieved. There might be a slight impact on the performance, and this is naturally the not only the discussions with the agencies, but of course we will look into compensating our customers. And of course, if there would be significant differences, this would be part of the discussion. Clearly.
Well, let me get to another issue. What about the impact on clean air? I mean, we know that that there's all kinds of health impacts, asthma, other respiratory illnesses that can seriously affect people, send them to the hospital or get sick because of NOx and these other problems. I mean, you obviously agree that NOx pollution can result in serious health and environmental effects. I would assume you would agree with that.
I have also read the EPA statement that in general, and not specifically to Volkswagen, they have indicated that there might be respiratory problems, which could also lead, I mean, I'm quoting yesterday basically, to hospital to visits.
Well, what are you going to do to rectify that? How do you plan to mitigate the harm caused by this excess pollution emitted into the air over the last 7 years? My understanding is that the NOx emissions from the affected vehicles are up to 40 times the allowable limit. So what are you going to do with regard to this excess pollution and the impact it may have had?
I think there's, first of all, many different studies, and so I would like to go back to the EPA yesterday of what they said. I think it will be part of the discussion, but I would also like to point out that if you look at 100% of nitrogen oxide emissions in the US, the car and truck industry is having 5%. Our group here in the US has 4% of the 5%, which is 0.2%, and out of this, 20% is TDI, which is 0.05. And now we can multiply this, which is not belittling this, and it's clearly unacceptable, but within this context, clearly the discussion will come up and needs to be addressed.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize Ms. Blackburn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Horn, you said profitability is your top priority when you were speaking of the dealers.
For the dealers, yes.
Yes, I would hope that safety, quality, integrity are top priorities, and profitability comes along there as a part of that picture. Let me ask you about this. Are you going to buy back the inventory that the dealers have?
No, our plan is not to buy back the inventory. Our plan is to fix the cars.
Okay, let me move on with you. Have you identified the individual or group of individuals that are responsible for the defeat device?
These investigations are ongoing.
You've known about this since the spring of 2014, a year and a half.
We know about this since September 3rd, that the violation is there, and since this time, and since the September 18th notice of violation, the board has acted and has asked Jones Day to investigate.
But you've known that there was some activity around this defeat device since the spring of 2014, correct?
No, I did not know, as I've said.
Okay, so you did not know it in the spring of 2014. So you just learned about it September 3rd, 2014.
Around the September 3rd events, yes.
Okay. All righty. Let's go to your 6-point remedy plan. You've talked some about point 3, which is that they are developing remedies. And I would assume if this landed on your plate September 3rd, that you all have put all efforts and energy into this plan, correct? Into the remedies.
Yes, correct.
Very good. All right, then let's go to point number 1. You state that Volkswagen will examine its compliance processes and standards and adopt measures to make certain that something like this cannot happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you give us a little bit of specificity on that, and what, if any, steps are currently underway to handle these compliance issues? What did you start as of September 3rd, 2015, and what is your timeline? How long is it going to take you to bring this into compliance?
So as I'm the CEO of Volkswagen Group of America, I can only report to you on what is managed by Volkswagen headquarters worldwide at this point of time. And as I said, it's Jones Day. They manage all the investigations in terms of who did what, when, how, and why, and what do we need to do in order to rectify this for the future in terms of process adjustments and compliance adjustments.
So then you're saying, as of now, you do not have a plan?
As of now, we are still in the investigations, yes.
Okay. When can we expect you to have a plan to handle compliance, to make the owners of your vehicles whole, if you will, to make the dealers that have trusted in you, to make them whole? Also, the individuals that are employed by your facilities, when are they going to have some certainty as it relates to the job? So you all say you're still investigating. So on your timeline, when do you expect that you're going to be able to say, this is the way forward?
But you mentioned 6 points, and we started with the first point, compliance. I don't have a timeline for this yet. We're working instantaneously with the dealers and developing plans by the week as we go, and you can ask those folks behind me on whether this works or not. And for the customer, it depends on the technical remedies. So again, this is generation 3, January next year, we will start, to give the software to the agencies. Generation 2, middle of the year, most probably generation 3, due to the technical complexity, will be a little bit later. So there's different timings, and I apologize not for having a full-fledged plan of the worldwide Volkswagen company right now here in my pocket.
So you are certain it is going to be a multi-year plan?
Excuse me?
You are certain the remedy will end up being a multi-year approach?
Yes. If you look at if you look alone at 430,000 cars, and the repairs might take 5 to 10 hours even in order to fix this, technical fixes. And if you look at your recall history in this market, also with NHTSA, then these actions take 1-2 years minimum. When the fix is available for everybody, including parts, and discussed with the agencies and agreed to.
Okay. Let's see, my time has expired. I do have one other question about point 2 in your remedy plan. Mr. Chairman, I will submit that and yield back the time.
Thank you very much. Now, recognize Ms. Castor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling the hearing. Mr. Horn, according to reports, VW's defeat device is found in nearly 500,000 vehicles. Are you confident in that number? Could it be more? Could it be less?
We are very confident in this number.
Pardon me?
We are very confident in this number.
Okay. Have you calculated the loss in value to customers, car owners?
No, not yet. That's the matter of the not only investigations, but the calculations are ongoing, and on Friday we will look at the first scenarios.
Okay. You've called your investigation preliminary, but you've known about this for a year and a half. The problems first came to light in May 2014. Is that correct?
No, this is not correct. As I explained, the study was published, and I had no reason to believe that there was a defeat device in those cars.
Well, you found out, according to reports in 2014, that there was an issue. Isn't that correct?
An emissions issue, yes, that's correct.
So what did you do at that point in time?
At that point of time, a plan was asked for from the engineers, and in July 2014, middle of the year, they presented a plan to me, which was, and this is very important also, which was agreed and discussed with the Product Safety Committee worldwide, and these are those guys who manage all the recalls, all the service action worldwide, including technical, procurement, legal, service, and those things. They came back with a plan, first of all, acknowledging that those results were correct, and secondly, with a clear timing on when those cars will get a software fix, which was also mentioned in one of the opening statements as of end of last year.
Do you feel like you've been personally deceived now after you found out subsequently that the defeat devices?
Yes. Yes. And
explain that.
Look, I worked 25 years for this company, and beyond my personal objective of dealer profitability, integrity, quality, and not cheating was always for me given for this company. And when I learned this, I'm as touched and moved, as my employees and as my
well, and another group feeling the effects of the VW defeat device defrauding are the VW dealers and their hardworking employees all across this country. In addition to consumers, a recent Associated Press article noted that dealers are facing, quote, a flood of angry calls, emails, etc., from Volkswagen owners who feel betrayed because they believe they had bought a car that polluted less without sacrificing the good gas mileage and the performance that comes with a diesel engine. Mr. Horn, how many VW dealerships are there in the U.S.?
We have around about 650 VW dealers and 350 Audi dealers.
And on average, how much of a VW dealer's business do these diesel models?
25%.
And these dealers are now the front line for unhappy customers who feel betrayed by the Volkswagen brand. And a media account yesterday quoted one dealer as saying, "This is the biggest fraud I've ever seen." What do you have to say in response to that? What do you tell these business owners and their employees whose livelihoods depend on the company?
I went immediately out with the dealer council on a call. I made a dealer video which was sent out, and the dealers even showed it to their children and their families and their employees, because they said that's the right thing on what we are approaching this.
So detail for us how VW is informing dealers about the defeat devices and the solutions to fix cars that feature these defeat devices.
As soon as we have the information necessary or ready and have discussed this with EPA and CARB about the timing, or alongside the dealers will be naturally informed.
They're not getting any information right
No,
now?
of course they get information.
So what, detail that for us.
First of all, they get the information that we financially help them through this crisis. Secondly, the first thing is we took the bonus thresholds out. They have free flooring. They got the discretionary fund. We've increased the incentives by $2,000 for loyal Volkswagen customers. Loyalty program.
What does that mean?
That means we get them started and don't let them dry out in the field.
Is that a direct payment to customers or to dealers?
The first 2 points, the bonus payments and the floor plan, is directly to the dealers. The discretionary funds is directly to the dealers, and the incentives are for them. This is a certain cash incentive that they can manage to bring loyal customers in, whether it's a TDI customer or a gas customer.
So is that the intention there for the dealers then to contact customers who have purchased cars since the model year 2009?
Yes, as one of the sure, yes.
Well, if VW is not giving any direction to dealers and their employees on contacting customers at this point in time?
No, of course. We have set up in the frequently asked question. We are guiding the dealers with real time, the same information we have, and which goes to our call centers as well, because those, have visited the call center in Auburn Hills. Those people are also front line. They need the same information, and as soon as we have it, the other people get it as well.
What has VW told dealers about how existing Volkswagen models will be affected? Cars that dealers have already sold and cars that are now sitting on the lots?
We've informed the dealers directly on September 18 in a call, the National Dealer Council. We followed up with letters and videos to do this.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm out of time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize Mr. Barton for 5 minutes from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and Ms. DeGette for organizing this hearing. I'm not a registered professional engineer anymore, but at one time I was. I still am an engineer by training. My daughter drives a Volkswagen Beetle. My former stepdaughter drives a Volkswagen Jetta. I don't think they're diesel. I think they're gasoline powered, but they're both Volkswagens. I've always had the highest respect for Volkswagen. I think it's a fine company, engineering-wise, product-wise. But I must tell you, sir, that it is extremely disappointing to look at the, I don't know the right word to use, immorality of the corporate decision to knowingly and willfully cheat on U.S. emissions standards. I mean, Volkswagen is one of the premier name brands of auto manufacturing in the world. And it's a reputation that's been gained over the last 50 or 60 years. And to have a company of your stature knowingly and willfully make a decision at the highest levels of the company to put a software program in your products that are meant and